Well, here we are again, doing another chapter in a book called What a Difference a Day Makes. And this is chapter 5 out of 10. So as soon as this is over, we'll be halfway there. And this is all about an old man, that's me, 79 years old, looking at his life and looking at it in a sense of what really made a difference. All of us feel like that we're special or whatever, or we wouldn't do a lot of things we do, but I'm special. And we're relating those through M.A.S.H, a motivated army seeking heaven, and GPS, God's purpose system. And that's what we're doing here on the mountain in Ford Mountain here in Blairsville. We got 38 acres, and we're trying to build and we've got a veteran cemetery, and we're building a wall out here that's a hero wall. And we're really excited about it. But we're also excited about this book. And that's going to tell the story as much as we can about what a difference a day makes. And in my life, and I didn't know it when we started this a few years ago, but in my life, there's only been 10 days that really made a difference. And we're trying to document those 10 days and then trying to relate what a difference that made in my life. And when you read this or study it, please, in the back of the book, there's blank pages. Fill out your days. I promise you, it'll help you think about your life. And now, if you're 25 years old, you ain't got 10 days yet. But there's going to be days that really matter. But, and again, I've had a full life. I've owned 42 different businesses. I've had over 6,000 employees. And I've made and lost lots of money. And that's been a roller coaster. And I am a combat veteran from the Vietnam War, and it played a huge role in my life. And when I got to Vietnam, I was just a kid. But I had a huge want to and a lot of ego that felt like I was bulletproof and could do anything. And then you learn in combat that you ain't bulletproof at all. You better be God protected. And that's one thing I did learn. But in this book, and I hope you enjoy it, this chapter is the chapter where I was born again. And so I'm going to back up a little bit before that birthday and tell some story about, boy, I needed to be born again. And as a boy in a little Baptist church in North Georgia, I was saved, went to the altar, and it was all good. And I personally call that a case to do better. And so I do better. And then, Lord, forgive me of this and that. But, and I'm going to say this right up front, I now believe wholeheartedly that you can be saved 1,000 times, but you can only be born again once. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to swallow, but That's what I have proven to myself. And so that born-again experience, and the only way I can compare it, and I don't mean that I'm a nothing, but Saul did not have a better experience with Jesus on the road to Damascus than I had when I was born again. Now, if we could reach and set Saul here right beside me and let him talk to us about what was going on with him a few months before he had the encounter, it would be an awesome story. Now, a lot of that's written in the Bible, but not the kind of stuff I'd want to talk to him about. I'd want, where is this? What are you feeling? What do you think? And we know what, he was killing Christians. He's a bad boy. And so here's this young man, and I'm now 31 years old. Now, I was in Vietnam at 21. So there was a 10-year gap between that and this, 10 years. And when I would go places, when I come back from Vietnam, if they wasn't a fight going on, I'd create one. It was just attitude. And I don't mean it just brutal go in and do something, but oh me. When I first got back from Vietnam, I went down to Fort McPherson, Georgia. Now, I was assigned to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina when I come back from Vietnam. But my parents lived there in Atlanta, Jonesboro, and Fort McPherson was 3rd Army headquarters, and Fort Bragg was also 3rd Army. So I told my buddies, and there was several of us, 4 or 5 of us, that come home from Vietnam same time and lived in the Atlanta area. So I told them, I said, I'm going up and see the Command Sergeant Major of 3rd Army and see if he can switch me to 3rd Army for the 4 months I've got left in the Army. I don't need to be up Fort Bragg polishing boots. And so I went, and they said, we'll go with you. So we loaded up, and when we got up there, I went into the Command Sergeant Major of the 3rd Army, he is the NCO of that entire, it's a big job. And when I went in, his secretary was sitting out front, and I didn't have an appointment, I didn't have anything, but I just told the woman that I wanted to see Sergeant Major. And she said, what's it about? And I said, well, I want to come to Fort McPherson rather than going to Fort Bragg. And she didn't know that, but anyway, she went and to talk to the Sergeant Major. And she come back out in a minute, kind of shocked. She said, he'll see you just in a minute. But it was like to her, who are you? This is a busy man. And so, but when I went through the door, I recognized him. He was one of my first sergeants in Vietnam. Yes. That's exciting. And so he stood up from his desk and come around. He said, Sergeant McGill, welcome home. And I wanted to hug him. Now we shook hands and did all the right military stuff. But he said, what can I do for you? I said, I just got home and I got orders to go to Fort Bragg, but my parents lived down here in Jonesboro, and I hadn't got but 4 months left. And I would love to do something here at Fort Mac rather than, go over that. He said, we can fix that. And I said, you can? He said, yeah. He said, I'll put you in the MP company. And, you know, it certainly ain't combat in Vietnam, but it's something that we can see done. I said, well, thank you, Top, but there's 5 of us. He said, what? I said, yes, sir. There's 4 more just like me right out there. He said, he looked at something on it. He said, well, we're going to put 4 of you in the MPs and 1 of you in whatever the social thing is there on Fort Mac. And actually, he made a lifeguard out of the 5th one. But give us all assignments. And I was just tickled to death. I mean, yay. But, so we still had a few days of leave left before we were to report for duty. But so we will report, all of us, to the MP company on a Monday morning. I'll never forget that. So I had a brand new 1968 Camaro. And so we come pulling through the gate and get there at 5:30 for a 6 o'clock. You got to be in formation, all that. So we pulled in there, and naturally, we were dressed just like we come from Vietnam. So had our combat patch and all that. 173rd Airborne, all of us. So we come walking into the MP formation, and the captain of the MP company was kind of taken back a little bit. He didn't realize all it was about to happen. I promise you this is going somewhere. But he told us, he said, I'm going to put you in charge of the stockade. I said, I don't know anything about a stockade. He said, well, all you would do is just guard prisoners and take them to work. I said, well, not that we can't do it, but as long as you got some kind of SOP that we can follow, we can do that. Okay. So we all go down to the stockade, which is right in the middle of the post there, and I walk in, and the NCOIC, that's the non-commissioned officer in charge of that facility. He said, here's your orders for the day. You wake them up at 6:30. You get them ready for breakfast at 7. Then you line them up for formation to go to work at 8. And bye. And bye. You know, that was all the education we got. And so I am now in charge of the stockade. I'm the NCOIC. And so we go in there and try to get everything adjusted to where we're going to have some idea what's going on. But the story here was that nobody told us that the prisoners had the cadre afraid to come in and do what they need to do. And it was true. It was bad. So I took a guy named Martin, big guy, but had a baby face, big guy, and would absolutely attack a machine gun. Wasn't afraid of nothing. And so he and I went in a stockade. I put one of my guys up in the tower with shotgun, and somebody had to stay up there just to guard the prison. But it's all new to us. We're just doing this. And so anyway, I walked into the first barracks and flipped the lights on, and my guy screamed, get up, whatever was doing. And somebody said out loud, "Turn that GD light off." And I mean, that was, and I looked at him and I said, "Did you hear that?" He said, "Yeah, I did." And these were double bunks, and just rows of them down each side of that room. I said, "I'll be back in 5 minutes, and I don't want a piece of this standing." And he just went down there and took them bunks and dumped them. Pulled these two and these two together, and 4 men fell on the floor and right down the line. And I mean, it was a mess. And I went next door and made the same statement. What are we going to do with this? And so we come back out, but we went back in the first one, and I told them they had 10 minutes to have this thing spotless. And anyway, we went out, was ready to do the morning formation. And so when I come down, and I come down the ramp to come into the formation, they're all just standing out there. And somebody called them all to attention, which is military, is what it should be. And they wouldn't have one of them snapped to attention. Just slumped and ain't doing nothing. So here's the deer in the headlight. And so I walked down there and I said, "Okay, who's in charge?" And to my dismay, there's a big old guy right up front. Said, well, however he said it, and it was never language that I'm going to say on this, but basically he said that we are, but he was the mouthpiece. And I said, well, this guy right here in the towers right above it, I've known him a long time, and he's got a 12-gauge shotgun in his hand, and he'll kill you. He's a combat veteran. He's been through it. And I just looked up in that tower and I said, me and this guy is going around behind this barracks, and one of us is going to come back out here and be in charge of this stockade. And while we're gone, if anybody so much as moves, shoot them. And he took that 12 gauge and put a round in the chamber and laid it down on him. And what they didn't know, he would shoot them. Now, I don't know if they knew it or not, but that was real. So we go behind the building. And as I was walking back there, because he's a big guy, he's bigger than I was, and all in himself. But when I was in Vietnam, and I was so thankful for this minute, I pulled 2 or 3 different operations with paratroopers that were South Korean. And they were mean. I mean, they would go in the jungle, and the Vietnamese just wouldn't mess with them because they wouldn't know Geneva Convention thoughts or nothing. You know, we're going to hurt you. And so, and I had several of them in my platoon. I saw 2 of them get in a fight. And oh, Lord have mercy. I mean, feet flying. Very few fists, feet. And so this one guy was actually in my squad. I said, you're going to teach me that. I want to know it. And so for days, when we'd finish our day, because what he was teaching me is be calm and try to end this with one blow, and that's with your feet. But he would teach me to throw your hands up in front to get somebody to get in a fighting position. and then take your foot and put it where men don't like a foot, and then go from there. So we went around behind that building and just like the play was laid up. Boom, 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 boom. And I drug him back around that barracks out in front of the crowd, and I told the tower guy, I said, call up to the hospital and have them send an ambulance down here. They did. And so, but for 2 days, it was constant ambulance. But on the third day, the cavalry was back in charge of the stockade. And of course, the prisoners didn't like that, but it's something that you learned. And there's a whole story with Fort Mac, and I don't know if we're going to stand there and tell it, but it was a learning process. But to come from a war zone to peacetime military was daylight and dark. And because we was in the MPs and was down in the stockade, we didn't stay there long in the stockade because there was 5 congressionals charged against us. That's prisoners telling their congressman that somebody's being mean. And so the provost marshal called me in his office and said, thanks that the stockade is now back in cavalry hands, but we're going to have to get you out of there. So they gave me white hat duty, which in the military, that's the best duty in the world. And as an MP, we'd go to the airport and make sure nobody's messing with the soldiers, and bars and all that. But it was just, but if somebody escaped, we got to go track them down. And the rest of the time that we was at Fort Mac, nobody ever got away from a work detail that we didn't catch quick. And we got known for that. But anyway, the point is that mentally we were different than those guys that were there that hadn't been to combat. It does things to you. You're very protective, and you look and watch. And so for all those years, all that mindset. For example, I started dating a young lady while I was at Fort Mac, and she worked at Rich's downtown. And one morning, and that's back in mini skirts and all that era, and it was a lot of beautiful women in Atlanta, Georgia. But I took her to work, and I had to park a block away from where she worked. And so she was got out of the car and walking down the street to her office. And again, beautiful, but a truck with 3 guys in it comes rolling down that street. And he stuck his head out the window and said 2 or 3 very vulgar things to that young lady. And it just so happened that the traffic light stopped them right here. And I opened this door and drug this guy out, the next guy, and then I had a billy club that I was trying to hit the driver, and I kept hitting the top of the truck. And just in a minute, there was a city cop pulled me back off all that stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that temper was that fast. And several times in that period of time, that temper got me in trouble. And now, 10 years later, I am tired. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of fighting. And one of those is physical and the other is mental. I had come to the end of a road, and I was visited my mom and dad at their house. And the little bedroom that I stayed in back 10 years ago is where I was spending the night. And mom and dad were in the next room. And guys, for all those years and for many years after that, I'd lay down to go to sleep. And I could not sleep if there was any light anywhere. There's a little red light on the camera. And if that little red light had been in my room, I'd had to get up and found a piece of tape and covered it. And that's how whatever it was, because I wasn't safe if it wasn't pitch black dark. Because if there's any light anywhere, then the enemy could see me or any reaction. And I don't know, it was just a mental block, so it had to be dark. And I was laying at that bed, and it was a little bedroom, and I was in it, and you come in the door and you walk between the bed and the wall and get in the bed. And so I was laying there in that darkness, and I'd heard about Jesus and all the stuff all of my life from a grandfather that was a World War I vet, medic. But he was a preacher for 70 years, and my mentor, and my mom right in the room next door, and she was just a praying saint. And she absolutely, her prayers, I know, kept me alive in Vietnam. But I was led in that room, and it was pitch dark. And I just had it. And I held my hands up in that darkness. And I said, Lord, I've read, I know, here, yeah, but you made me. Now I've got to know that I am born again and yours are not. Now hear me. I can't express it, but I'm going to try to tell you. From the tips of my fingers to the bottom of my feet, it felt like a bolt of lightning ran through me. But here's that threw me out of the bed against this wall and into the floor. And it was loud. Now here I am sitting in the floor, 2 o'clock in the morning, butt naked. And the only thing that I could say is, okay, I know, and thank you. So there can never be any doubt with me about God, about being born again. And I've asked God to forgive me several times since then. But I could never ask him to save me or be born again. Couldn't ask, because it's already done. And I was so thankful for that. So all those years, that's where that was to me. And I've said this to several people. Saul on the road to Damascus couldn't have had a better encounter with God than I had in that little old dark bedroom in Jonesboro, Georgia. Just me and God. And it changed my life forever. So from 31 to 79, I've been born again. And I know what it's like to go to heaven. I know what it's like to be mean. I know what it's like to be full of temper, but I also know what it's like to be full of love. And let me tell you, the love side of that is a lot better than the mean side. Now, I don't think this ever goes away. I will die a combat veteran. And the parts of that that says, don't tread on me, is real. But ladies and gentlemen, in my life, and we talk about it, there's 10 days that made a difference. Well, my number one day that made a difference in my life, out of all these 10 days, is the one I just described. The day you're born again. That's the most important day that you will have or have ever had, whichever is appropriate for right now. Being born again is the most important thing that you can ever do, because what it does, it gives you peace, purpose, and power while we live in here. The peace to know that God is here, and gives you purpose. What is our purpose? To see as many people born again as we can make happen. And then the power to do that. And all we've got to have is want to. Because somebody that you meet, somebody you work with, it is just as simple as this. You want to go to heaven? Well, sure I do. It's just as simple. Be born again. So you want peace. And I don't care who we are. We want purpose in our life. And that was what was wrong with that guy back between he was 20 and 30. He was searching for purpose. Well, do you want purpose? Yeah, it's simple. Be born again. He'll give it to you. And in our studies right now, that's GPS. It's going to come inside us. And as a combat veteran, what he just accepted to do was to pull point in this war zone for the rest of my life. God is pulling point. And if he's out in front of you saying, George, booby trap, you won't go there. Or if you do, you know the repercussions. Because he's never going to interfere with our free will. But know he's there, and he is there. And it is exciting when you hear God speak to you and say, that's dangerous, don't do that. Or that's going to be trouble, don't do that. And it matters. And then power. And power to me is that he gives us the ability to ask the simple question. You want to go to heaven? I don't know if there is a heaven. Oh, if there is, do you want to go there? Yeah. It's simple. And so whatever is brought up, the solution to it is be born again. And here we are, writing a book about that, and I hope that when this is done, you get a copy of it and enjoy it. And when you do, if you can, come up here to these North Georgia mountains and see us. So until then, the old coach, love you. Have a great day.